It was a brisk afternoon in the heart of Emberton, a tight-knit town where familiarity was a way of life. The town itself was a mix of the old and new. Sleek, modern apartment blocks cast shadows over quaint, family-run shops that had been there for decades. Emberton had its share of charm, but beneath the surface was a quiet tension, often unspoken but ever-present. Mila Dawson, a poised woman in her early 30s, had just left one of her favorite cafes, a cozy spot she frequented for her midday escape. After savoring her last sip of tea, she made her way to her car, parked just around the corner. Mila, though the wife of the town's mayor, Victor Dawson, always avoided the spotlight. She liked to blend in, never wanting to be treated differently because of her husband's influential role. As Mila walked, she noticed two police officers walking briskly in her direction. Officers Jones and Avery stopped directly in front of her, blocking her path with an air of urgency. Their intense gazes swept over her as if assessing a threat. "Ma'am," Officer Jones began curtly, "we need a moment of your time." Mila paused, momentarily taken aback, but kept her calm. "Is there a problem, officers?" she asked, her brow furrowed with confusion. Jones exchanged a glance with Avery before continuing. "There's been some suspicious activity reported in this neighborhood. We'll need to search you." Mila blinked, the confusion deepening. "Suspicious activity? I just left the cafe. What exactly do you suspect me of?" She kept her tone polite, but a growing sense of unease stirred inside her. Officer Avery, arms crossed, spoke up this time. "Is there a reason you're avoiding the search, ma'am?" Mila's instinct told her something was off. She hadn't resisted, but this didn't seem right. "I'm not refusing," she said, her voice steady. "But I don't understand why I'm being targeted for a search." Without further discussion, Avery took a step closer, handcuffs visible in his hand. "Turn around, ma'am. Let's not make this difficult." Shocked, Mila shook her head slightly. "I haven't done anything wrong. What is this about?" Jones' expression hardened. "Turn around. Now." A few people passed by, casting sidelong glances but quickly looking away, clearly uncomfortable and unwilling to intervene. Mila realized she had no choice but to comply. Slowly, she turned her back to them. The cold metal of the cuffs snapped around her wrists, and Avery began his search, pulling at her coat and rummaging through her belongings. Mila felt a wave of humiliation wash over her. She had done nothing, yet here she was, treated like a criminal for simply being in the wrong place at the wrong time. When the search was over, Jones spoke again, his voice laced with condescension. "You sure you're not hiding anything?" Mila exhaled slowly, keeping her composure. "I'd like to make a phone call," she said, her voice now firm and unwavering. Jones chuckled sarcastically. "Go ahead. Who are you calling? Let's see what happens." With her hands now free, Mila calmly reached for her phone and dialed a number. "You'll see soon enough." It didn't take long for the line to connect. A deep, authoritative voice answered. "Mila? What's going on?" "Victor," Mila began, locking eyes with the officers. "I'm being searched by Officers Jones and Avery." The officers, who had been smirking moments earlier, now stood uneasily as the weight of her words sank in. Their confidence faltered slightly, but they still looked unbothered, as though there was nothing to worry about. "Where are you?" Victor asked, his tone shifting to one of concern. "Right at the corner of Willow and Main. I just left the cafe," she explained, keeping her composure. "I've done nothing wrong, but they're treating me like a suspect. Stay there." "I'll be there in 5 minutes," he replied sharply before hanging up. Mila straightened her back, feeling a new sense of determination as she waited. She knew her husband would handle this, but the sting of being treated this way lingered. She had done nothing, yet she was made to feel like less than herself. Officer Jones, who had started to pace nervously, looked up when he heard the unmistakable sound of a large vehicle approaching. A dark SUV pulled up sharply, and the door flew open to reveal Victor Dawson, tall and formidable in his official capacity. His face was a mixture of controlled anger as he walked toward them. "Mayor Dawson," Officer Avery mumbled, his confidence draining as he recognized him. Victor's glare silenced him before he could say another word. "Step aside," he commanded. The two officers moved back quickly, now unsure of themselves. Victor turned to Mila, his expression softening slightly. "Are you all right?" he asked in a low voice. Mila nodded, but the humiliation she had endured was still raw. "I'm fine, but—" Her gaze shifted toward the officers who were now standing awkwardly nearby. Victor's face hardened again as he turned to face them. "You two, explain yourselves," Officer Jones stammered, clearly regretting his earlier bravado. We received a report of suspicious behavior in the area, sir." She matched the description. Victor's eyes narrowed. Description of what exactly? Was there a threat? Did she resist? Avery, barely audible, muttered, "No, sir." The street that had been busy moments before was now eerily quiet. Onlookers watching the scene unfold, but no one daring to intervene. Victor took a step closer to the officers, his voice dangerously calm. "I'll be following up on this," he said coldly. "You can count on it." The officers exchanged nervous glances before quickly making their way back to their patrol car, leaving Mila and Victor standing in the street. Mila exhaled slowly, the tension finally releasing. "I didn't think this could happen to me," she said softly, still processing everything. Victor wrapped his arm around her protectively. "I'm sorry, Mila. This shouldn't happen to anyone." As they walked back to their car, the quiet town of Emberton didn't feel quite as familiar or welcoming as it once had. And Mila couldn't shake the feeling that, despite her husband's position, there were battles that still had to be fought for basic respect and dignity. Victor stepped closer, his voice cold and sharp. "Tell me, then, why did you feel it was necessary to target her? Was it because of the color of her skin? Is that all the reason you needed?" Officer Jones' voice wavered as he tried to respond. "Sir, we were just following protocol." Victor's eyes narrowed. "Your so-called protocol is flawed," he said, his tone rising. "And there will be consequences for this." The tension in the air was palpable. Jones and Avery stood frozen in place, aware that they had crossed a boundary from which there would be no easy return. Without breaking eye contact, Victor pulled out his phone and made a quick call to the department's oversight committee. His voice was controlled, yet it carried an undeniable weight of finality. "I want Officers Jones and Avery placed under immediate investigation," he said clearly. "They are to be suspended pending a full inquiry." Jones' face drained of color, his earlier confidence replaced by panic. "Sir, we didn't mean," he stammered, but Victor's glare silenced him. "Didn't mean to do what?" Victor shot back, his voice like ice. "Didn't mean to harass my wife? Didn't mean to treat her like she didn't matter? Or didn't mean to get caught doing it?" Avery, who had remained silent up until now, stepped forward nervously. "It was an error, sir. We were just doing our job." Victor's expression darkened. "An error? One that could have spiraled into something far worse. Do you think that makes it acceptable?" By now, a crowd had gathered on the quiet street, their whispers rippling through the onlookers as they watched the drama unfold. Some watched in hushed reverence, while others exchanged glances, realizing that this wasn't just about Mila. It was about something much bigger. The atmosphere grew even heavier as officers from the town's internal affairs department arrived. Jones and Avery were quickly pulled aside for questioning, their earlier arrogance replaced with fear and regret as reality set in. Mila stood beside Victor, her relief tempered by a lingering sadness. She had been treated unfairly, not because of anything she had done, but simply because of how she looked. Though justice was in motion, the experience left an indelible mark. Victor turned to her, his stern demeanor softening as he looked into her eyes. "I'm so sorry you had to endure this," he said gently. "This won't happen again." Mila gave him a small, grateful smile. "Thank you for coming so quickly. I didn't know what else to do." "You did exactly what you should have," Victor reassured her, his arm gently wrapping around her shoulders. "And now, those officers will have to face the consequences of their actions." As they turned to leave the scene, the murmurs of the crowd echoed behind them. The people of Emberton had witnessed something they wouldn't soon forget. A moment where power was held accountable, where those meant to uphold the law were reminded that they, too, were not above it. It wasn't just about Mila anymore. It was about the town's unspoken tensions, brought to light for all to see. That day would remain etched in the memory of Emberton, a reminder that injustice, even when dressed in the uniform of authority, could not go unchecked. And for Mila, though the wounds of the encounter would take time to heal, she knew this reckoning was only the beginning of a larger change.